digital video is growing across platforms. I wanted to actually start with a little bit of video, since that's nice for a video show, to actually have some video to talk about, but also set it a little bit historically, and both a mixture of both historic and personal, which I think is one of the best ways to get to understand the context out of which digital video comes. I mean, we all obviously look to and understand video within the context of television history. It was the signature medium of the last century, especially a $70 billion ad industry grew up around it. And so it's natural, as we move into digital video, we still talk about GRPs, 15s and 30s. And we know, and certainly the video industry in the first decade and a half on the web grew up sort of chasing that chimera of, can we bring a lot of those concepts online? It's the stuff that media buyers want to plan and buy against. It's what's familiar. And personally, for each one of us, it's the history we all bring to it. I mean, I, for instance, am a TV baby. I mean, a real TV addict. I was one of the true ones. For instance, many of you may remember this. How many of you are old enough to remember that the coming of the fall preview issue, this I think was from, let me go back, I think this was 1972. The fall preview issue of TV Guide was like a big event. I mean, it set forth the map of the whole year of what TV was going to look like, maybe with a little tinkering at the middle of the year. But for me, in my household, that was a big deal. I pored over this thing. I literally memorized the thing. In fact, I was such a TV baby that I memorized the TV grid. In my house, they didn't need the TV Guide. In fact, they stopped subscribing to it, and principally because I knew the grid. They could ask me on any given night what was on, and I knew it. I wasn't an idiot savant. There was talk of that, but I was not an idiot savant. It really was actually easy to do that. I mean, when you're 11, 12 years old, you can memorize the roster of baseball teams. It was easy enough to get 3 networks down to know. But I was the guy, instead of knowing who was on, who was batting lead on the Mets, I was the kid you went to find out what was playing against Love American style. Obviously, everything has changed since then, but to some degree, the industry doesn't want it to change. There is still those impulses. To some degree, we gush over the metrics that we can move across the platforms that give us that sense of familiarity. And some of these very terms, the GRPs, the 15s, the 30s, they still resonate. We still want them to be there. But the reality of video everywhere is that as we see video move into the taxi cab, the billboard, the smartphone, the checkout counter, storytelling by sight, sound, and motion is so diversified, so fragmented, so recontextualized in ways we never anticipated that the TV paradigm doesn't really work as well for us. In fact, the impulse to focus our narrative energies on that old paradigm really misses the point that TV, this moment in our personal lives and also in larger media history, really is just a moment in a larger continuum where sight, sound, and motion, before it and now after it, has a different history, a more diverse history, and we're only on the cusp of seeing that, but in many ways we can look backward to see some inspiration for it. For instance, this same video addict who watched TV relentlessly was also in on the early forms of video collecting and user-generated video. I was also the guy who had the Super 8 camera in his basement, making stop-motion animation or small epics with his sister and the neighborhood kids, and creating the user-generated video that ultimately would become the vidcams and then the YouTubes of today. It was all there already in our history. It was already in our cultural DNA. And just as well, I was a video collector. I don't know if any of you remember this stuff, but those of you who had 8mm projectors or Super 8mm projectors, the early version of the DVD was buying these little 3-minute 8mm clips from old movies. So for the die-hard mediaholic of the 60s and 70s, you could create movie theaters in your basement out of buying stuff from Black Hawk Films and Castle Films. These were the 3-minute versions of recontextualizing a whole century of movie making and bringing it into your basement. And also the idea that branded content, which now, of course, in the last year or so especially, we really are coveting. The idea that somehow this is anything especially new in video is ridiculous, because some of the best branded video we were raised on. Rob, why don't you show this, this clip? I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember this.
The Bell telephone system brings you one of a series of programs on science to understand nature's laws.
Look at who made this thing.
Let's try that focus again, Jim.
Coming up.
Title's okay. Now let's test that first animation. Roll 2. Okay, hold it. Now sharpen the focus. Right. Hold roll 2.
Doctor, how was the sun born?
Don't know exactly.
You're a scientist and you don't know?
Could use my imagination, but you're the fiction writer.
Imagination? Well, we could ask Mr. Sun himself.
Yes, if we had a magic wand.
Sure, you've got it. Magic. Your science and my magic. We'll open up our story of our Mr. Sun with a little fantasy. You know, showmanship. Go back into time, show the birth of the sun out of time, stardust. Here, we'll turn back the clock.
Ooh, that'll only take you back 12 hours.
Oh, all right. We'll open up the curtain of our imagination. This'll be our magic screen. Yours will be just for facts. We'll pull back the curtains of our magic screen. We'll dream up a clock. There you are. A clock that's been ticking since time began.
All right, thanks, Rob. Anyone remember that? Anyone ever see that in school? For 10 years, that was seen in pretty much every science class multiple times. And it was one of a series of brilliant films that Bell Labs made. An incredible early example of branded video that really had a profound influence, not only on a generation of science students, but also on the impression of Bell Labs. It was done very subtly, but it was done using animation that everyone remembered, that resonated with everyone. And for those of us who think that short forms of video with huge amounts of viral popularity are anything new, take a look at this juxtaposition of two videos that move across an entire century of time. This is one of the first great film hits of the turn of the 20th century, 1902.
From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Now let's look at one of the latest creations from on Vine, the Twitter video 6-second video tool created by Nordstrom. They used Vine to create a special Vine animation. But this idea, while very different, this idea that the short form using visual trickery as a way to attract mass audiences and to use it in a compelling and even viral way was even true in 1902. That Fun in the Bakery Shop, one of the first film hits, one of the first hits that people actually talked about that had word of mouth, that brought people into theaters to see it. And again, that use of visual trickery was one of the pieces there that helped attract people. My point, I hope, is not a trivial one or simply merely a piece of historical trivia. I think there's something to be gained and understood by understanding that throughout the last century, a lot of the elements that we're seeing now that are components of digital video as we know it, short form, user-generated, highly personalized, brand crafted and created. A lot of these have always been here in some form. They've been a part of the sight, sound, and motion DNA all along. In many ways, they're waiting for us to rediscover them and to put them to better use and to broader use by the set of tools that digital allows us. And over the next 3 days, I think we're going to be looking at a lot of these pieces, and it helps us open up the creative palette beyond the TV we were all raised with, beyond just the 30 and 60-minute video pieces and long forms that we're so invested in. There really is a broader palette here that's always been here, waiting for us to reignite it. Over the next few days, I think we're going to be coming at this from a lot of different perspectives. Today, we'll be looking a lot at the buyers and the planners perspective, and especially looking strategically at how people are planning video now, but also how they're looking at the online terrain, especially through the new fronts. Tomorrow, we're going to be looking at branded video, at metrics, and at viral distribution. And then on Sunday, we'll be looking at some of the leading edge formations of digital video, especially over-the-top platforms and real-time bidding. But since I started you with a little bit of the video past, let's move into the video present and start with our keynote, which is an assessment of the present forms. From someone who's been looking carefully at the evolution of digital video for a number of years, I think a lot of you know him and know the role that Digitas has been playing. Digitas has been at the forefront of developing content for brands and leveraging the power of video, especially. They've been at the forefront of the new fronts themselves, but also especially have been important in developing strategies and content across the second screen as it's evolving into that next force for digital video. Jordan Bitterman is the Senior VP of North America's lead for social, mobile, and content at the company. He appears to be overseeing 3 bleeding edges all at once. He's led the company's brand content efforts as well as the new front effort. Please welcome Jordan Bitterman. There you are.
You never want the clapping to stop before you get up to the stage. It's kind of like, no. It's kind of like being the guy who wins the Oscar for like digital video editing, and he's got to come up from all the way in the rafters to get there. Wow, that's not going to be good. This is a video crisis. Do you want to take a look at this for a second while I maybe do a Marco Rubio moment? Or something? Okay. That's keynote. I don't know why that would be happening. Let's see here. Anyone heard any good jokes? Actually, while we're doing this, so you just saw up on screen that I'm starting with a thought or a theory that digital video has an image crisis. So just by a show of hands, anyone in this room agree with that sentiment? Is there something to that fact? It's early, but yeah. So yeah, anyone disagree with that?